September 2019. A Texas courtroom falls silent as the jury foreman stands. After 4 weeks of testimony and just 3 hours of deliberation, 12 citizens are about to deliver a verdict that will shock the nation.
We, the jury, find the defendant, Sandra Garner, not guilty.
The courtroom erupts. Sandra's daughter Andrea later called them the sweetest words I've ever heard in my life. Her defense attorney fights back tears, but across the room, Jon Garner's family sits in devastated silence, watching a woman they believe killed their loved one walk free. How does someone walk away from evidence like this? The murder weapon found hidden in Sandra's car, wrapped in wet paper towels, exactly where her own son told police to look. Internet searches on her personal devices asking how to kill somebody in their sleep, and 16 ways to kill somebody and not get caught, conducted just days before her husband's death. Gunshot residue on her hands and arms. Her presence as the only other person in the house when Jon Garner was shot 3 times whilst sleeping beside her. This wasn't a whodunit. This appeared to be an open and shut case of premeditated murder. The prosecution had physical evidence, digital evidence, forensic evidence, and motive. Sandra Garner faced life in prison for killing the man who had cared for her, through her devastating multiple sclerosis diagnosis. So how did 12 jurors find reasonable doubt in just 3 hours? How did one of Texas's most documented murder cases, filmed almost entirely on police body cameras, end with an acquittal that left a family shattered and a community divided? To understand this verdict, we need to go back to the beginning. Back to a case that seemed so straightforward that investigators never considered they might be wrong. Back to a family so torn apart by suspicion that a mother and son now publicly accuse each other of murder. This is the story of Jon Garner, a 42-year-old Texas businessman who died on his 18th wedding anniversary. Jon Garner was born on November 1st, 1975, in Waxahachie, Texas. By 42, he embodied a particular version of the American dream, building himself from the ground up through determination and grit. He was general manager at DHL Motors, having worked his way through management positions at Campbell's Soup Company and nearly 2 decades at WEPAK, a packaging company in Paris, Texas. Those who knew Jon described contradictions. He was outgoing and blunt in business, the type of boss who wouldn't hesitate to fire underperforming employees. Yet he battled depression and took medication to manage it. He was a proud Texan with an impressive gun collection, 49 pistols and approximately 12 rifles. But at home, he was devoted to his wife, Sandra. Sandra Louise Garner was 13 years older than Jon and twice divorced when they met, whilst both working at WEPAK. Despite the age gap, Jon pursued her relentlessly until she agreed to marry him. They wed on New Year's Eve in Las Vegas, creating what seemed like a happy blended family with Sandra's 2 adult children from previous marriages, Wesley Miller and Andrea Miller. The dynamic changed dramatically in 2014 when Sandra was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. As her condition progressed, Jon transformed from husband to full-time caregiver. He managed her medications, handled their finances, and became her primary support through the debilitating illness. They lived in Maypearl, Texas, a town of just 1,000 residents where Jon's father lived directly across the street. By January 2018, they seemed like a stable, if challenged couple, facing Sandra's illness together. Jon was the breadwinner, the caregiver, and Sandra's lifeline, which made what happened next all the more shocking. December 29th, 2017, 11 p.m. to midnight. Whilst Jon Garner slept, someone used Sandra's iPad to conduct a series of disturbing searches. How to kill somebody in their sleep. 16 ways to kill somebody and not get caught. The timing was crucial. Sandra's stepson Wesley Miller was at the Garner home that evening. Her devices didn't require passwords, meaning anyone in the house could access them. But the searches would later be seen as evidence of premeditation, someone planning the perfect crime. 3 days later, additional searches appeared on the devices. Methods of suicide, ways to die. Were these the desperate thoughts of someone planning murder, or the dark research of someone contemplating ending their own life whilst battling the depression that often accompanies MS medications? The prosecution would argue the former, the defense would argue the latter. But on that December night, someone was researching death, whilst Jon Garner slept peacefully, unaware that a countdown to murder had begun. January 1st, 2018, New Year's Day. Jon and Sandra Garner celebrated their 18th wedding anniversary at home in Maypearl. Every year, they marked the milestone that commemorated their Las Vegas wedding on New Year's Eve. Family gathered, including Wesley Miller, who visited that evening before leaving around 7 p.m. It would be the last time anyone besides Sandra would see Jon Garner alive. The couple went to bed that night as they had for thousands of nights before. Sandra with her MS, Jon as her devoted caregiver, both settling in for what should have been the start of another year together. Jon's substantial gun collection filled their home, but he slept peacefully beside the woman he'd cared for through illness and hardship. Hours later, January 2nd, 2018, 12:45 a.m. My husband's been shot. I think he's dead. Sandra Garner's 911 call brought Maypearl Police Department officers to Creekview Circle within 15 minutes. What they found was Jon lying unresponsive on the bedroom floor, shot 3 times, including once to the head. He was pronounced dead at the scene. Sandra told officers a terrifying story of home invasion. She claimed she had awakened to gunshots to find a masked intruder in their bedroom, holding a flashlight and gun. The man allegedly spoke directly to her.
And he says, "What I came here to do is done. I didn't come here to shoot you."
You were having this conversation with the guy who just shot your husband?
Well, I said that, and he said it back to me, yes.
According to Sandra, the intruder explained his motive. Jon had fired him from WEPAK, costing him his house, wife, and children. "I worked my ass off, and then he fired me," she quoted him saying. The man demanded approximately $14,000 from a lockbox before instructing her to count to 100, threatening to return if he heard sirens. But there were immediate problems with Sandra's account. The family had multiple dogs known to be protective. Why hadn't they barked at an intruder? There were no signs of forced entry. Nothing appeared to be stolen, despite the supposed demand for money. For Police Chief Boyd Norton, this was his first murder case as lead investigator. The investigation that followed would be captured almost entirely on police body cameras, creating an unprecedented record of every decision, every mistake, and every missed opportunity. Police body cameras captured the crime scene processing, the interviews, the searches, and eventually Sandra's arrest. It would become the most extensive murder investigation footage ever aired on television. The cameras also captured critical mistakes. The crime scene wasn't properly secured, with first responders entering and exiting freely. Sandra's hands were swabbed for gunshot residue, but not bagged, a basic procedure that could preserve evidence. Chief Norton used his personal mobile phone to take crime scene photographs that would later disappear and never be recovered. A crime scene technician didn't arrive until 8 hours after the murder. Most crucially, the cameras captured the moment that changed everything. When investigators interviewed Wesley Miller, Sandra's son and Jon's stepchild, his response shocked them.
Dog, big dog.
The dogs. Why are they going? How would so-and-so knew how to get in? And for somebody to sneak up on them like that?
Then he provided information that would build the prosecution's case. He knew exactly where Sandra kept a gun, under the front seat of her Ford Mustang. January 5th, 2018. Armed with Wesley's information, police returned to search Sandra's Ford Mustang. They found it locked. When officers asked for keys, Sandra's demeanor shifted. "Fuck off," she told them. When they finally gained access, they found exactly what Wesley had told them to look for. Under the driver's seat, wrapped in wet paper towels inside plastic bags, was a Taurus 38 special revolver, a rusty pistol Jon had given Sandra as a gift years earlier. The gun bore no fingerprints. No DNA evidence. But on January 10th, ballistics confirmed this weapon had killed Jon Garner. Wesley Miller had just handed police the evidence they needed to charge his mother with murder. That same day, police officers waited in Sandra Garner's driveway. When she arrived home, body cameras captured her arrest for first-degree murder. Bond was set at $2 million, an amount she couldn't pay. The case seemed bulletproof. The murder weapon in her car. Internet searches about killing someone in their sleep. Gunshot residue on her arms. Her presence as the only other person in the house. The prosecution had everything they needed. Sandra would spend the next 21 months in Ellis County Jail, whilst her family disintegrated around the question of her guilt. September 2019. The trial that should have been a formality became a family civil war fought in open court. Defense attorney Thomas Pappas faced overwhelming evidence, but had a strategy that would prove devastatingly effective. He didn't just question the prosecution's case, he offered an alternative killer. Wesley Miller. The defense argued that Wesley had murdered his stepfather and systematically framed his mother. The motive? Money, believing he was named in Jon's will. The opportunity? He was present during the night of the Google searches and knew where Sandra kept her gun. The method? Plant the weapon after the murder and direct police to it. The prosecution dismissed Wesley as a suspect, reportedly believing he was not smart enough to commit the crime, a stunning assessment given they were prosecuting his mother for the same murder. The body camera footage became central to the defense. Every investigation failure was highlighted: the missing photographs, the unsecured crime scene, the compromised evidence. The jury watched investigators make mistake after mistake whilst building their case. Under scrutiny, the prosecution's case began to crumble. The gunshot residue, only 3 specks, could be explained by Sandra lying next to Jon when he was shot, not by firing the weapon herself. The internet searches were conducted on devices requiring no passwords whilst Wesley was present. The murder weapon had no fingerprints, unusual for someone who supposedly handled it to commit murder. Most damaging was the revelation about Wesley's alibi. Police initially believed Netflix records showed he was watching television at home during the murder. But they had misread the time zone. Wesley had no solid alibi. The defense painted a picture of a grieving son who immediately suspected his mother, knew exactly where to direct police to find evidence, and had motive to want Jon dead. Meanwhile, the prosecution struggled to explain why Sandra would kill the man who provided for her and managed her debilitating illness. After 4 weeks of testimony, the jury retired to deliberate. For a murder case with such apparently overwhelming evidence, what happened next was extraordinary. 3 hours later, they returned with their verdict. Not guilty. The speed of the deliberation suggested they had found reasonable doubt quickly and decisively. The defense had successfully argued that every piece of evidence could be explained by Wesley's involvement rather than Sandra's guilt. Jon's family watched in devastation as the woman they believed killed their loved one walked free. Sandra's family celebrated vindication whilst cutting Wesley completely out of their lives. Sandra Garner returned to the same house where Jon was murdered, saying she wanted to be close to his memory. Jon's parents moved away from their home across the street. His extended family severed all contact with Sandra. But the most bitter split occurred within Sandra's own family. She and her daughter Andrea cut off all contact with Wesley Miller. Andrea declared publicly, "As far as I'm concerned, I don't have a brother anymore." Today, Sandra maintains her innocence whilst believing her own son killed her husband. Wesley continues to maintain his innocence whilst remaining close to Jon's extended family. A mother and son now publicly accuse each other of murder, their relationship destroyed by the case that freed Sandra but solved nothing. Jon Kevin Garner died at 42, shot 3 times while sleeping beside his wife on their 18th wedding anniversary. Someone in that house pulled the trigger. Someone planned his death or acted in a moment of rage. Someone has escaped justice. The case raised troubling questions about small-town policing, family dynamics, and the American justice system. How do you convict someone when the investigation is compromised from the start? How do you find truth when family members point fingers at each other? Sandra Garner cannot be retried due to double jeopardy protections. Wesley Miller was never charged. Jon's murder remains officially unsolved. But there was one more moment that captured the essence of this entire case. When CBS correspondent Richard Schlesinger sat down with Sandra Garner after her acquittal, he asked the question that everyone watching wanted answered. Under the law, you cannot be charged with this crime again, Schlesinger told her, even if you say you did it. So let me ask you, did you kill your husband? Sandra responded,
Did you kill your husband?
No. Man was the love of my life. I told you he was all I had. He was going to take care of me for the rest of my life. Without him, I have nobody. No, I didn't kill my husband.
Was she telling the truth? A grieving widow maintaining her innocence despite overwhelming evidence? Or was she a calculating killer who had just pulled off the perfect murder? That's for you to decide. In Maypearl, Texas, a small town remains divided. A family has been torn apart beyond repair. And somewhere, someone knows exactly what happened that January night. Someone who escaped justice through a combination of police incompetence, family betrayal, and reasonable doubt. Jon Garner deserved better. He deserved justice. He deserved answers. Instead, he became the victim in a case that left more questions than answers. Please don't forget Jon Kevin Garner.